These 5 men have vanished after boarding a submersible to visit the Titanic. Last Sunday, 5 people boarded a submersible, which is kind of like a submarine in Newfoundland, Canada, but has lost contact with the operator only 1 hour and 45 minutes into the trip. The Titan was built for tourists to visit the wreck of the Titanic, which is located 12,400 feet underwater. It has 96 hours of oxygen available, which means that the people inside will run out of oxygen by Thursday. The Titan can reach 13,123 feet underwater, and it's operated using what looks like a modified game controller. The 5 people who boarded the Titan are known to be wealthy businessmen as well as a 19-year-old boy. But what's interesting to me is that everyone had to sign a waiver accepting that this submersible can potentially cause their death. The Titan only started taking people down in 2021, and it's been reported that there's been so many issues with this process. And keep in mind that it's not cheap to do this excursion. Everyone paid $250,000. Nevertheless, I hope the Titan is found and everyone is brought back home safe.
Photos from history you weren't meant to see. This photo shows what women used to wear in the 1920s. The woman in this photo is wearing what's called a swimming mask, designed to protect against jellyfish stings and sun damage. The entire face would be covered except the eyes, nose, and mouth, and the result is quite disturbing. But this next photo is actually terrifying. This photo might just look like a bench, but it's actually the jail cell used in the real Salem witch trials. People who were accused of witchcraft would spend their final moments here before their execution. Between the years of 1692 and 1693, more than 200 people were accused of being witches. But last up, this might be the most disturbing one of all. This photo might just look like a bunch of scribbles on a page, but there's so much more to the story. This was a letter that a woman named Emmy Hawk wrote to her husband when she was admitted as a schizophrenic patient in a psychiatric hospital. And the letter says, "Darling, please come," over and over again. She later passed away in the year 1920. Follow for more.
So you may have seen this image floating around the internet today, because this image, which was recently released, was taken before Emma Brown, featured below, took a gun and turned it on her father and then herself. The photo is from last year in September, and the plan was part of a murder plot that her and another 12-year-old girl came up with. It was later discovered that Emma's plan was to kill her family and her pets and then run away with a friend. And after she shot her father in the abdomen, she was running towards the driveway when it's believed that she panicked and turned the gun on herself. This all happened in Texas, and now authorities believe that she was headed towards the driveway so she could grab her car, drive about 230 miles to her friend, and then the both of them were going to drive to Georgia together. It's also now believed that Emma didn't come up with this plan herself. It was actually planned by the friend, but they're not releasing the friend's name, and it's not clear how Emma and her met. It's a little implied that cops are blaming social media for this. They issued a statement that basically said, now is a good time to make sure you know who your kids' friends are, especially if they're meeting people off the internet, because you don't ever really know what they're talking about. This is why you have to be careful in national parks. So in 2016, a man completely dissolved in a hot spring in Yellowstone. A lot of people don't realize these hot springs are near boiling temperatures, and a lot of them are severely acidic. And falling in happens more than we realize. It terrifies me so much that I made an entire podcast episode about it that's going up tonight. So it's believed that a 23-year-old man and his sister went into Yellowstone to go hot potting, which is when people secretly hang out in the cooler hot springs. It's like really not allowed in the park. His sister was filming him as he went over to one of the hot springs to reach down and touch it to test the temperature, and that's when he tumbled forward and fell in. A rescue team was able to get there, and they saw his body floating in the pool because a fall like that kills you immediately. But a thunderstorm was coming in, so they were going to have to wait a while to get him out. And by the time they got there, there was nothing left. And unfortunately, this does happen more than we realize. Check out tonight's episode if you're interested in hearing more.
Everyone laughed at him for marrying her. 6 years later, this is what she looks like now. He was so in love with her that he got married to her despite of what people thought. People would make fun of him and laugh at him, saying that he was making the wrong decision. But the couple got married and had their honeymoon. 6 years later, the woman decided to have surgery for her weight loss. She went from looking like this to looking like this, and immediately when she had the transformation, everybody decided to call her and tell her she was beautiful. The same people that were laughing at the guy for proposing to her.
Was it a freak accident or was it murder? Today we will be deep diving into the case of Audrey Mest. Audrey was a beautiful French freediver who died in 2002. At the time of her death, she was in a relationship with Pepin Ferrez, who is a famous freediver. Before she even met him, she had a bit of a schoolgirl crush on him. She wrote her thesis on Pepin and the human form. And from everything I've read about Pepin, he seemed very self-absorbed and narcissistic. He even ghost wrote his own autobiography and fabricated stories to make himself sound cooler. Audrey met him when he went to go freedive in Mexico. They instantly bonded over their love of freediving, and soon after she went on to travel with him. Within a few short years, Pepin and Audrey were married. Many friends recounted that Pepin always made their marriage look very happy on the outside. Lots of pictures, lots of smiling, etc. But in reality, he was physically, mentally, and emotionally abusive to Audrey and was very possessive of her. On October 12th of 2002, Audrey went to go attempt the No Limits dive in the Dominican Republic. This dive was to break a world record. Audrey had made it 171 meters down, opened the valve for oxygen, and nothing came out. Someone had forgotten to fill the tank, or ensured that the tank would be empty. Also, the lift bag that would have helped her get safely to the surface had either been inadequately inflated or had leaked. But it's also important to note that Pepin did dive 90 meters down on his own oxygen to try to save Audrey. And it's also important to note that Audrey was the third person to die on a dive organized by Pepin Ferrez. Pepin was responsible for Audrey's air tank and also didn't let anyone cross-check his work. But no one's ever been criminally charged for her death. So what do you guys think? Comment below.
Unsolved cases that keep me up at night. On January 16, 2014, a group of 4 friends were playing a game of dares. One of them was dared to go into this cornfield that was rumored to be responsible for the many disappearances in the area. The friend agreed, following the rules of the game, and ventured into the cornfield by himself. For what felt like hours had gone by, the 3 friends had lost track of the man and were starting to get worried. Too afraid to go on themselves, they contacted the police, and the police showed up after a while and searched the area. They searched and they didn't find any trace of the guy. But they did find his phone, and after going through his phone, they found the last photo captured before his disappearance.
This is the most terrifying McDonald's you'll ever see. In 1986, the first floating McDonald's called the McBarge opened up. The plan was for the boat to travel around the world and for people to enjoy McDonald's everywhere. But then something crazy happened. The 5 employees that lived on the boat went crazy. They started to hear voices at night and even began hallucinating. All of this slowly started driving them insane. After 3 years of this, one fry cook decided enough was enough. She decided to end her life. Her body was discovered on this very boat the next morning. The McDonald's were forced to close and was even abandoned for over 20 years. It seemed like everyone forgot about this floating nightmare. This was the case until 2 years ago when a company decided to renovate the boat. And this article was published about renovating the boat. But a year later, there was still no news about it. And the McBarge was still abandoned. But then a couple YouTubers decided to swim and break into the McBarge. As they went around, everything was eerily silent. Like and follow for part 2.
I bit the apple cause I loved you. And why would you lie? And then I realized you're just as naive as I am. Oh, you're so traumatized, it makes me want to cry. You dumb bitch, I loved you, I loved you, I loved you, it's true. I wanted to be you and do what you do.
It's based on a true story. This guy, he gets convicted 10 years in prison for gun charges. This is all real. Larry Hall is his name in real life. They want to pin murders on him. They've kind of caught up to his game now. He would say to the police, oh, I murdered that girl in that county. I'm confessing to it. But then they would go through the research and be like, no, you couldn't have possibly. But he would cop to it. And then the cops would be like, that's what he does. He confesses to murders. He's a bullshitter. But he really was killing people. He was confessing to false ones so he could get away with the real ones. Holy wild. They got to get him to confess to one of these murders because they found the girl's body. Because he was killing kids, like 14-year-old girls, like brutal shit. them. Horrific. So they say to this kid, look, you got the gift of gab. You got 10 years in federal prison. We're going to transfer you to this maximum security prison where Larry Hall is. If you can get him to confess to the murder of this girl that we have evidence on, your sentence is commuted immediately and you're out of prison. But he was in a minimum security prison, so he would be able to either coast through 10 years or take a chance and go to the prison with murderers, rapists, and potentially be murdered in the shower stall. But if he can get him to confess, then he'll get out.
Holy shit.
And that's what the show's about.
See, that's right. Is that a person?
That's definitely a person.
That's a person. That's a person.
29-year-old Taylor Parker has just been sentenced to death for murdering her friend and stealing her unborn child. Taylor met Reagan Hancock online, and then they became real-life friends. In 2020, Reagan was happily married with a daughter and nearly 8 months pregnant, and up until the day before she was murdered, Taylor was stopping by her house and dropping off gifts for the baby. And here you can actually see Reagan thanking Taylor for Starbucks on Facebook the day before she died. Reagan was also seemingly pregnant, but no one knew she was faking it to keep her boyfriend from breaking up with her. When the 9 months were up, she couldn't keep up with her lies, so on her due date of October 8th, she headed over to Reagan's house in New Boston, Texas. And here is just one example of the lengths Taylor went to fake her pregnancy on social media, and this is a photo of the fake gender reveal that she posted to Facebook. It was around 10:30 a.m. on October 9th when Reagan's mom found her face down on the floor of her home with blood everywhere. She told the dispatcher her daughter was 34 weeks pregnant, but EMS personnel quickly determined that there was no longer a baby in her stomach. Reagan had suffered more than 100 stab wounds, and her baby was gone. It turns out that about an hour earlier, a Texas state trooper pulled over Taylor's speeding car along the Texas and Oklahoma state border. She was attempting to perform CPR on a newborn and gave the officer the impression that she had just given birth. When reports came in that a woman had been murdered and her baby was stolen, police immediately returned to the hospital where Taylor had been admitted. The baby had tragically passed away, and she was subsequently arrested. Taylor already had 2 children of her own, and in the end did all of this so that she could stay with her boyfriend. Her sentencing began on October 12th, and it took the jury just 90 minutes to sentence her to death.
Disturbing facts that school never taught you. Every time you're walking around, your fingers and your feet grow an extra size. People's fingers swell up sausage size, while your feet grow an entire size larger. This is due to the amount of blood flow. The royal family used to have dedicated people to watch them reproduce, so that way they had proof that everything was kind of sticking in the family. You can actually die from pooping too hard. Although it is rare, severe straining while pooping causes your body to enter what some call a panic mode, which is a rapid increase of your blood pressure. The correct way to poop is to squat, sit on the toilet, and put your knees to your chest. I'm gonna keep it real, I don't think a single person I know does that. The ear on the human body is the easiest part to go. You can literally take your hand right now, put it on your ear, and pull your ear off. Your brain is just telling you to not do it. If you're ever in a fight and you take your fist and you punch it into somebody's liver hard enough, it will sound like a squeaky toy. If you've ever seen something really cute and your first thought was to squeeze it really hard, you're not alone. The reason you want to squeeze it so hard is because subconsciously your brain wants to kill it because it's too cute for you. Make sure to like and follow. We're about 5,000 followers away from 5 million.
This is one of the most horrific things I've ever heard of happening to a person. So senseless, so meaningless. This is Randy Cook, and he's an Uber Eats delivery driver. He's a delivery driver in Florida. Sadly, he was. This one hits so close to home for me because I deliver DoorDash and have for the last year, and I'm going to tell you what I'm about to say is literally my worst fear. So he was on his last delivery of the night. It was 7 p.m. when he texted his wife that he was going to hit this one last delivery and then come home. Sadly, he didn't come home. At 7:48, his wife texted him and there was no response. So she contacted the authorities. After 48 hours of him not returning home, the sheriffs got involved. They contacted Uber Eats and found out his location and the last address that he was at. So they went over there and knocked on the door. They didn't see anything suspicious, so they left. The thing is, this last delivery was less than a mile from his own house. The neighbor's video surveillance captured Randy on the delivery walking up the driveway, and then the surveillance camera just cuts off. But then something horrible happens. The next day's surveillance camera shows somebody walking out with several trash bags. Deputies checked those trash bags and they had human remains inside. His wife, Kathy, had told authorities that she knew something horrible had happened to her husband. Something horrible definitely happened. His dismembered body was found in those trash cans, inside of the trash bags. Why? Why take someone's life so senselessly? They're delivering food to your house to make money for their family. Like, what is wrong with this world? And why are there so many sick people in it? Comment. Let me know what you think. This is horrible. And honestly, I don't even want to deliver for DoorDash anymore. And yes, our GPS shows our location, but that's not going to stop you from being put in trash bags. I personally think these apps need to do better.
But when my love takes me higher, I bring that fire, and I got everything that I need for me right here. I've never felt so alive now.
When you're outside,
I know what my heart
my mind. 'Cause sometimes I look in her eyes, and that's where I find the glimpse of us.
can't bring my vibe down.
If you guys want to talk about someone with a lot of red flags, let's talk about Taylor Parker. Taylor was recently sentenced to death for the October 2020 murder of Reagan Hancock. Taylor stabbed Reagan 100 times for the sole purpose of stealing her unborn baby. Reagan was 35 weeks pregnant, and Taylor needed a baby after faking her own pregnancy for months. Taylor lived in Texas with her boyfriend, Wade Griffin. Taylor already had 2 children, but got a hysterectomy back in 2015, which prevented her from having any more kids. Well, her boyfriend, Wade, didn't know that. Taylor never told him. Wade said that their relationship was an emotional roller coaster. He said that Taylor always lied. Wade said that their relationship was getting pretty rocky when Taylor announced in January of 2020 that she was pregnant. Of course, she wasn't. She faked pregnancy tests and reused old sonogram photos from her previous pregnancies. Remember at the beginning of the video when I said the thing about the red flags? Well, raise your hand when you hear one. People were really starting to grow suspicious about Taylor's pregnancy, but I don't think anyone could have imagined what she was about to do next. Taylor was friends with a 21-year-old named Reagan Hancock. Reagan was pregnant and she already had a 3-year-old daughter. In October of 2020, Taylor would go over to Reagan's home and she would beat and then stab her 100 times. Taylor would then cut Reagan's baby out of her stomach. Taylor hopped in her car and started driving with the newborn, but she was soon pulled over by a police officer because she was driving erratically. That's when the officer noticed a newborn baby in her lap with the umbilical cord still attached. The officer rushed the 2 to the hospital, and sadly, the baby was pronounced dead. The hospital staff grew really suspicious when Taylor refused to be checked out by the nurses. It didn't take them long to arrest her and charge her with first-degree murder and kidnapping. Taylor's trial began in the fall of 2022. It took the jury an hour to deliberate and find Taylor guilty of capital murder. Taylor Parker has been sentenced to death.
Scary games that you won't play,
But we will.
96%. For those who are just coming in, we're quarantined because of coronavirus, so we can't make 100% yet, so we're just going to keep leading up to it. By the way, I just posted a new YouTube video. Click the link in my bio. I answered a lot of your guys' questions. I did a really big Q&A, so thank you guys. So the game we're playing today is called Red Static. Pretty much I'm going to have 2 ping pong balls over my eyes listening to static noise while my entire room is lit red, and I'm supposed to hallucinate, and kind of the same concept as Red Door, Yellow Door, just probably a little bit more dangerous. All right, let's get it. That shit works. I'm not doing that again. That's fucking creepy.
This woman laid on a couch for 12 years until she was basically melted to it. So have you ever heard of Lacey Fletcher? Lacey's parents were Sheila and Clay Fletcher. They moved to Slaughter, Louisiana about 28 years ago. As soon as they moved to Louisiana, Lacey became involved in her school. She was making friends with all the neighbor kids. She liked to go outside and play. She even joined the volleyball team and seemed like the typical teenager. Lacey was described by her peers as highly intelligent but a little bit immature for her age. Lacey really enjoyed things that her peers thought of as childish. But she was still very smart and very outgoing, but not much else is known about Lacey. At the age of 14, Lacey's parents decided to homeschool her, and that's when she just kind of disappeared from the public. Her friends from school and the neighbor kids just stopped seeing her come out as much as she used to. And it kind of seemed like Sheila and Clay were the reason that Lacey was being so isolated. They were the reason that she no longer went out into public. She was able to have a birthday party when she turned 18 years old, and she invited all of her school friends and just friends to come watch Disney movies, but at this point, these kids were 18 years old. They didn't want to sit around and watch Disney movies with her. The last time Lacey was seen in public was by her neighbor in 2007. This neighbor thought that Lacey looked very thin, but he just figured that she was exercising because she was using those weights that you can put around your ankles to walk around. And then Lacey is not ever seen again in public. In 2017, the neighbor did ask about Lacey, figuring that she had either gotten married or moved on, gone to college, or done something else with her life. But Clay told him that Lacey was still there. She was still at home. But the neighbor didn't press further. He didn't question why he didn't see her. He just kind of let things be. Then on January 3rd of 2022 at about 2 in the morning, there is a 911 call received from Sheila. Sheila says that her daughter has stopped breathing. When emergency services arrived, they realized that there was something very wrong with the situation. Lacey was laying on the couch and it almost seemed like she had melted to it. She had all kinds of sores that had been opened all the way down to the bone. Her hair was knotted up and there were maggots crawling around in it. And emergency services could tell that Lacey had been laying there for a very, very long time. There were feces and there was urine all over the couch. I'm going to have to go to part 2. Give me a couple minutes to film it and it'll be up down in the comments.